OpenAI just joined the open source race, releasing the smartest model from an American-built company. But that's not the most important thing. Let's dive in. What we got is two open source models, GPT OSS 120B and GPT OSS 20B. These are measured by the number of parameters. Think of them as the size of their brains or neural networks. A model with more parameters performs better. You can try it on this website called the OSS Playground, where you can choose one of the two models and you can adjust the reasoning level. The models think for a longer period of time when they have more reasoning. And you can also turn on reasoning. Let's go ahead and add a prompt here to see what the model can do. I'll say, help me draft a detailed standard operating procedure for transferring liquid nitrogen into dewars for use in the LCLS instrument area. And I'm going to hit send. Now I'm using the smaller model, so keep that in mind. It's going to be a little bit faster and it's going to get done pretty quickly. The quality of the output is pretty good. It's even made all these different tables for me, providing a really detailed and well thought out answer. One thing that's unique is that you have access to the thinking that it did to create this, and it's going to be quite thorough. If I try the same prompt with something like ChatGPT and choosing one of the reasoning models like O4 Mini, you'll see that we'll get a similar answer, but instead of letting me see all the thinking, it's showing me a summary of how it thinks, and then it's giving me the results. O4 Mini didn't give me as detailed a response as what we got from this new model. However, this particular playground doesn't have access to tools, so whereas ChatGPT was able to check the internet and look up sources for this answer, the current playground doesn't let you do that. So it would be up to you to verify some of these procedures, although these models can be used with tools. Developers can learn a lot from the reasoning that's available when you run these tools to learn how to train new models using these different steps. I think this model surprised the industry for a number of reasons. And the first is how good it is. You can see the specs for the different models here. The larger model has a lot more parameters, but notice that both of these models activate a limited number of parameters whenever it's working on a project. So it's like using a smaller part of its brain to accomplish some tasks without activating all of its neurons. It also uses a technique called mixture of experts, where different experts are assigned different parts of the tasks. Each expert is going to be better at doing different things. And so you can see the difference here between the amount of experts that it can run and how many of those experts are going to be active for every token that it ends up running. The context length is pretty generous. That's where it remembers the entire conversation, which covers both the inputs and outputs. Now, if you take a look at the evaluations and compare it with other models like O3 or O4 Mini, you can see that it's in par with those models. Fairly close enough not to really matter when you ask these open source models questions. If you compare them with the rest of the market using the artificial analysis website, they list this model somewhere in the middle of the pack. The 120B model is right here in the middle. But if you look at the other numbers, they're not that much farther ahead. And you can see the other model right here. ChatGPT OSS isn't the best model right now. That honor goes to Grok 4, but we're still ahead of the GPT-5 announcement, which should be coming pretty soon and might change this right here. The honor of the best open source model goes to Qwen 3 currently. A lot of the other closed source models perform better. That's not too shabby though. We're talking about O3 Mini level performance, and that model was state of the art just a few months ago. And it does shine in a lot of other ways. So if you take a look at the pricing section of this model, you can see that it scores the highest in intelligence versus cost to run for both the 120 billion parameter as well as the smaller model right here. And if we look at speed versus latency, it's actually the fastest model in terms of outputs per token. In terms of price, when you're using a third-party tool, it actually does extremely well. So this is a very efficient and cheap model to run, even when you're using a third-party service. This model is so efficient that the smaller one can run on just 16 megabytes. That's small enough to work on your laptop or heck, even on a phone. And it means that you could use it for things like programming without having to connect to the internet. And you can even process sensitive requests. The larger model can run in a single H100 GPU from NVIDIA, which makes it pretty affordable for companies to buy and run the models. They're available on Hugging Face, and you can get them if you're using tools like LM Studio or Ollama. I have a Mac Studio M1 Ultra with 120 gigs of RAM, and it runs the 20 billion parameter model with no problems. I'll type in that same prompt again, and I'll hit send. However, running locally will mean that the model will perform a little bit slower than running them in a very fast server. And here's the answer, similar to before. I can also run the 120 billion parameter model and try to do a new question here. And you'll see that it performs similarly. It will be a little bit slower. I have a pretty good machine, so it can run it without any problems. This could be a turning point and open this up to industries where having an open source model that can be loaded locally could be critical, like running HIPAA compliant apps in healthcare. But that could also apply to legal and financial companies who are leery of running models from countries or companies that don't have the established level of trust and experience like OpenAI. Another advantage that's not obvious is that this model is compatible with other OpenAI APIs that are industry standards. So it's compatible with the popular Responses API, which makes it easy to build stateful interactions with these tools. This happens to be a pretty good coding model, as you can see by some of these stats, and it's great at general problem solving, and also something that is more and more critical these days, which is tool calling. That means the ability of using connectors and third-party tools like browsers in order to accomplish tasks. These models are customizable and trainable. Like open source models, they can be modified and fine-tuned so businesses can adapt them to their needs, and other companies will build new and better models based on ChatGPT's open source options. Now, there's a bunch of other technology that you can read about by looking at the details page and reading the model card, which is a technical definition of how the model works. Back in the 70s, the personal computer boom was a jumble of incompatible systems. Today, we're seeing the same scramble with AI models. OpenAI's GPT OSS is a push to set the rules early, shaping which standards win the next generation of artificial intelligence.